survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. And we're back for another episode of Product Driven, a very special episode today. Today is the launch of Product Driven, the book, and I've got Craig Ferril here with me today to talk to me and help go through this conversation about the launch of the book. And for those of you who read the book, you will find out, I think, hopefully Craig knows, page 115 is called Find Your Craig. So I found my Craig and brought him here today.
Find your Craig.
Did you know that was in there, Craig?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So Craig, you were definitely one of the first readers of the book, early readers of the book, and we've worked together for a long time, and we worked together at Full Scale Ventures. So, I started down the journey of writing this book a couple years ago. I've been on a lot of other podcasts and different things, and a lot of times I'd go on these podcasts, and part of things I would talk about is like, I wish more software developers had like a product mindset. I wish they thought more about the product and less about the code. And I guess that's always seemed obvious to me because that's how my career started. Like 25 years ago, I started my career by talking to people, understanding their problems, and then helping them solve them. Not like lost in a cubicle somewhere being handed requirements. So it's like my career started differently, but not everybody's career is that way, right, Craig?
100% right. I think you and I both have a little bit of a similar origin story. I had the same start to my career where, basically someone was like, hey, we've got this problem, go figure out how to solve it. I didn't have somebody as like a business analyst or, a product manager or something like that. And so, I think we both come from a similar, beginning, which is you know how to write code and you can go talk to people, go figure this out. And it definitely establishes sort of a different, worldview when you start there, I think.
Well, and I think we would both agree we need all types of engineers. We need engineers that are very heads down. They're like, go figure out how to solve this deeply complicated like technical problem, right? Just go solve this super complicated problem. We need those kinds of people. But we can't have only those kinds of people that don't understand like why they're solving those problems or why those problems matter or verifying like if they should continue to solve those problems, right? And we definitely need leadership that understands like why are we solving that problem. And I think the biggest problem that you and I see from other engineering leaders and especially startup founders are the ones that are so far divorced away from why they're doing the work. And they're in leadership. And they lose sight of the customer. They lose sight of sort of the business strategy. And you and I are actually probably guilty of doing that at some point in our career, right? We get in love with the technology, in love with the problem, or we think we've figured out what needs to be built. And so we kind of go heads down and maybe go heads down for way too long. And then eventually we talk to enough customers like, oh shit, we kind of missed the mark here.
Yeah, 100%. You covered a lot of ground there, and there's a lot to unpack there. But I think the thing that when you first told me you were going to write a book, first I thought that's the craziest thing I've ever heard you say. That sounds like a lot of work.
It was a lot of work.
But also, I felt like it was really timely. I've had some really interesting conversations. I've been fortunate, to get to know a lot of product leaders, engineering leaders, and business leaders, just like you. And I think we're seeing a similar pattern. And so I thought it was really cool that you took this time to focus on, maybe helping people take a step back and examine sort of how you're approaching, a really important, job, which is building the future, building tools that help people solve problems. That's what people are trying to do. They want an easy button. They want somebody to help them solve a problem, and they're happy to give you money if you can solve their problem. And maybe what's a little bit hard sometimes is really connecting to the pain, the problem, because the problems, and this is something we used to talk a lot about at Stackify, the problems are out there and the answers are out there, not inside of these walls, like not here. We have to go out, ask questions, put ourselves in someone else's shoes. And, it's interesting. I think that very well-intentioned people have created a system, and you talk about this in the book, a system of, you know, going like, let's go faster because engineering is a form of value creation, right?
Right.
It's the factory floor that creates value. However, going really fast in the wrong direction doesn't do anyone any good. And so, I used to, you know, many years ago when I was leading product and engineering at a past company, I used to say I want chefs, not short order cooks.
Right.
I want everyone in the company to think about what's the customer hungry for, and then let's look in our pantry and our refrigerator. Let's figure out how we can assemble something that solves that, not just stamping out egg McMuffins. Like let's actually really think critically about how we solve these problems, and let's engage everybody. Let's engage the engineering team. They hold the keys to what's possible. So let's get their brains involved. Let's get them thinking about it. I think that's the spirit that you came at this from, and I think it's time. In fact, I had a conversation not that long ago with an engineering leader who said, "My engineering team wants to know why their work matters. They want to understand how they're making an impact."
Yes.
I think that's really prevalent out there, and I think people are getting insulated from that. They don't want to be.
Well, I think there's a few things there to unpack. You mentioned earlier, it's like I think software engineering has long been the bottleneck, right? It's slow, it's expensive. We know that, right? So it's like I feel like in most companies we've built all these things around it to sort of shelter the engineering team, take load off of them, take thinking kind of away from them, like product thinking, right? So you have product managers and QA and DevOps and other forms of engineering leadership and management, architecture, all these things. So it's like you put the developers sort of in a corner, turn off the lights, be like, just go write code. If you need coffee, we will bring you more coffee, but heads down, go write the code. Because that was the bottleneck, right? But honestly, that didn't produce very good results either, because the developers are very disconnected from their work, why their work matters, not understanding why it matters. They lose some sense of purpose and all of those things. But if they don't understand why they're solving the problem, they can't necessarily solve it the best way. And if you don't ask the developers, like, hey, is there a better way to do this? Like, instead of us spending months solving this thing, is there like a quick version that we haven't even thought of? Or should we buy some other product and not build this at all? Like, there's a lot of different ways to solve problems. And unless you stop and think about all of those things, you may not come to the right solution. But what really I think is changing all of these roles is AI, right? If engineering is no longer the bottleneck, right? If we can write code, even if it's just twice as fast, not 10 times faster, or what the hype tells you, let's just say it's like we're 40% faster, like maybe twice as fast. Does that mean we need to have stand up twice a day now instead of once a day?
Because what
Right?
everybody wants is more meetings.
Right. It's like the only way to solve that is the engineers have to have more of a product mindset. They need to have more ownership in the work.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they have to be spoon-fed requirements twice as fast, which we know doesn't work very well. It's not what you want anyways, right? Even at Full Scale Ventures, for what some of the projects you and I are working on together, right? We want the team to take ownership. We want them to wake up every day and understand why they're building what they're building, and they bring ideas and they take ownership in their work. We don't want to have to spoon feed them the requirements all day long, right? We want them to take ownership of the work. Now, is that a messy, hard process? Yes. Is every developer good at it? No. But we need at least some of them to be good at it, or otherwise you and I end up being the bottleneck forever, right? Like we have to be the ones that make every decision, spoon feed every requirement. Like we don't want that either. So it's either we choose to be the bottleneck, which is hard, or we choose the other hard work, which is to build up the team. And I think that's the point of my book is like we have to make that decision. And as you as a leader have to make that decision of, you know what? It's time for me to stop being the bottleneck. It's time for me to build up the team, build product thinking, ownership, trust them, motivate them, do all of the things to build up the team. So it's not just us as leaders as the bottleneck all the time.
Yeah, and I think you touch on this really, really nicely in the book. One of the things that, so I don't want to be like overly harsh when I say this, but what I have seen in a lot of companies that I've interacted with, is the the issue isn't it often isn't execution. We have developers who can crank out code, fairly quickly in a lot of organizations. You talk in the book about how really leadership in a product-driven organization is about communicating vision. It's about, it's more about creating the conditions of this federated ownership, which is really, I
Yeah.
think, kind of what you're talking about. It's like let's share ownership, because if anybody, whether it's product, if it's product management that's the bottleneck, or if it's leadership that's the bottleneck, or whatever it is, if we're going faster as developers than we've ever gone before, the problem shifts. I think
Yeah.
that's what you touch on is the problem shifts. The problem isn't throughput anymore; it's direction.
It's product thinking and direction. And what are we doing? Why are we doing it?
Yeah, and it's going to become a potentially a huge problem. Organizations I don't think today are ready for this problem that's coming.
No. And and so I think there's a couple other things there to unpack, and I want to talk about the product driven model here in a minute too. But I think AI is exposing, I think, engineers and teams that weren't very good. So you have a team that maybe wasn't producing a lot, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, you should be able to produce things twice as fast now, but it's like you never really producing anything to begin with. Or it's like you never understood what any of this code was to begin with, but now you can have AI produce code twice or 10 times faster, but you don't even know what any of this code actually does. Like you were sort of just copying and pasting it the whole time. So it's like, are you copying and pasting bad code 10 times faster now? Like, are you creating bad code 10 times faster now? Like, it's going to expose some people that were not very good at their job. Let's be honest.
I think the other thing that it potentially exposes is going, let's say, 2 times faster in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
You know, if or it's going to change how we think about requirements, how we think, right? If it takes you, if the development team's going twice as fast as a product manager, how do you keep them fed?
Yeah.
How do you
That's it.
get out in front? You can't possibly,
And
with the same structure that we're used to,
yep.
get far enough out in front of the development team to keep requirements in the pipeline for them to be moving in the right direction. So how do you respond to that? And I think that's one of the things you take on in the book, that is going to be a new challenge for businesses in this new age.
And it all 100% of this problem is all leadership, right? And that's why I wrote this book. It's like all this starts as a leadership problem. Like at full scale, what we realize, our best developers, they ask the best questions. They just care, they're curious, they ask questions, right? The worst developers ask no questions and they say yes, right? They just follow direction and go on about their way. And the only way to solve that is leadership. It's like it's making sure your developers ask the right questions, you hire the right developers, you give them space to ask the questions, all those things, right? All this starts at a leadership problem. And the best example of this is actually the company I sold 14 years ago. They've had 14 years to innovate. They have, I don't want to say unlimited money, but let's just call it unlimited money. They've probably invested over $100 million in R&D in the last 14 years. They have done very little innovation. They could have hired anybody they wanted. What is their problem? It's leadership. It's the appetite for change, risk, innovation, all of those things. Guess what? AI is not going to help them. It's not going to help them at all. Their problem isn't needing to write code twice as fast. Their problem is leadership, understanding the strategy, the product strategy, risk, innovation, all of those sort of things. AI is not going to help any of those things. That is the bottleneck. The bottleneck is product thinking and allowing the team to take ownership, go drive, drive the future of where the company, the product is going, the ownership, all of those things. And so many companies are stuck in there. They're stuck there. They're stuck in this perpetual maintenance mode. And part of it is they're not listening to customers. They're not listening to the market. They're not driving outcomes that really matter, right? And one thing I talk about in the code is if you're not looking outwards to what matters to the customer and the market, you inevitably look inwards, right? And so all these companies end up in this, I'm just going to say it, sort of death spiral of enshittification of like, we're just going to work on technical debt, rewriting stuff, legacy, like all these sort of things. And it's not that those things don't matter. They do matter, but they should matter in the sense that they unlock some sort of value or outcome to your customer. not like we don't know what else to do, so we're just going to keep doing these projects. Like we want to do this event streaming or, Elasticsearch or all these different things. We're going to upgrade all these things. Yeah, they work, whatever, but we need something for the team to do. So we're going to rewrite these things. That is like a death spiral. So those things matter, but they've got to be tied to outcomes that drive the company and the product forward, So that's the problem. It's like we've got to drive value to the customer. And I feel like that just gets so lost in these teams. And that's really what I wanted the book to be about. It's like, how do we keep the customer first? The value to the customer has to come first.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing that the word that comes back to me as you talk about those things, and it's something you touch on in the book, and it's something we talk about, is courage. And
Yeah.
the larger the company, the harder it is to have that
Yeah.
courage. But as a leader, that's how you unlock greatness is giving people, the license to disagree, to challenge, to ask
Yes.
questions, to, things like that. And one of the things that always stood out to me in our time at Stackify is you would tell people, "I want you to call my baby ugly," and
Yeah.
you said that over and over again. And I thought, I think that's refreshing for the team to hear because this is the CEO of the company, the person who's sort of the visionary leader of where this is going, saying, "If you can make it better, tell me how. I'm
Yeah.
all ears. That means we make more money." And I
Yeah.
think that's kind of that's the lighthouse, right? Like, how do we make more money as a company? How do we serve customers better? They're tied together. How do we make this better for our customers? And if that's a customer saying, "If you would just do this, I would give you more money," or if it's
Yeah.
an engineer saying, "Hey, this is a way that I know we can make the product better for our customers," whatever it is, like good ideas can come from everywhere. But it takes courage on the part of an engineer to say, "Hey, I think we should do this differently." It takes the right conditions, setting the right environment for
Safety for
people.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's missing in a lot of places. Just the fear of failure, right? Like you don't want to do some career limiting thing where you take a chance and you put your neck out, and
Yep.
then you make a mistake, right? And
Leadership has to support this.
yeah, exactly. And one of the things we talked a lot about at Stackify was win or learn. Like, look, we want to win, but if we don't win, like, let's at least get better.
Yeah.
Let's at least get better. And so the idea was, you and I were trying to create an environment of safety there where people could take chances, and you wouldn't be, as long as it was a non-fatal mistake, like you're not going to be punished for it, right? As long as we can get better as a result of it. And I think I think that's one of the lessons that comes out of the book that I hope people really latch on to is, you can't create a culture of ownership and a culture of fear at the same time.
So I think I got the actual first print of the books yesterday, which is kind of cool. I have a whole stack of them now. It's kind of cool to see them. And as we think about like why I wrote this book and why I think this book is so important is there are a lot of startup books, a lot of great startup books, and a lot of great product books. There are also a lot of great engineering books. Like there's countless books about how to write code and all sorts of different things, like clean code and architecture and all these different things. There's lots of great books. But what I feel like the book that was missing is the book that I wrote, which was how to tie all that together, right? Like, it's easy to write a startup book and say, okay, blue ocean strategies or red ocean or, all these different things. Like they all sound great, but it's like, how do you build a team that actually delivers this? Like, how do you build an engineering team and culture that actually delivers this? And I'll be the first person to admit, I am not a culture person. I never could, in a million years, would have thought I wrote a book about culture or leadership. It seems so weird to me. Like that is not me at all. But in writing the book, what I really learned in kind of self-reflecting over my career is how important that culture really was. And it's not really, maybe throw out the word culture. It's just mindset, right? It's the mindset of like, how do we run a team? How do we scale the team? How do we want the team to think about things? Giving them to take ownership, all those different things are important, right? And so as I started writing this book, and it took me about 4 months to write the book. As I started writing the book, like I didn't know exactly what direction I was going with the book, but I knew it was about product mindset, and I wanted the engineers to have more of a product mindset. I knew that's how it started, okay? But I kept writing about the same things. I kept writing about focus, and ownership, how important like clarity of the work is, the engineers understanding what needs to be done, and courage. Like I kept writing about these same things. And through the process of it, I decided I'm like, you know what? Really what I'm talking about here is like some sort of model or a playbook. It's like these are the things that are important. So I kind of pivoted the book after I wrote the first version of it, or the second version of it, or the third version, I don't know, along the way, and created what I called the product driven model. And so the product driven model is actually on the back of the book. It's like the most important thing. And if somebody reads this book, I think it is the most important takeaway. And it's those 5 components. It's vision, right? Like, why are we doing whatever we're doing? And I don't mean some HR bullshit about vision. I mean, like, why are we doing this thing this week? Why? Why this thing? Why does this thing matter? Like, is really important at every level. Just understanding the big picture and just the basics of like, why are we doing this? Because you make better decisions if you just understand the why. Like, it's so important, right? Focus both on like what matters, like why are we doing this thing over that thing, like the trade-offs of like why we're making the decisions we're making, but ultimately keeping the customer as the focus, right? The outcomes, like focusing on what really is going to drive us forward, right? There's a lot of different kinds of focus in the book. We go through a few different things. The third piece of the model of the 5, the third of the 5 is clarity. And had this issue with my wife this morning, actually. We're packing for a trip, and she tells me a little bit of information, but doesn't tell me all of the information. So guess what happens? We failed, confused, didn't get the clarity. Don't tell her I told you this. But it highlighted the exact same problem. It's like clarity. And so in the book, I think there's 3 kinds of clarity. The first one is the why, like why are we doing what we're doing? That's part of the clarity. The second one is scope. Like what's in scope, what's out of scope? Like what do we need to know? Like what are we doing, what aren't we doing? Like is important. And the third part of clarity that's really important is the technical part of it. Like how are we going to build or accomplish whatever it is we're going to do? All those things are important. And clarity to me is the fuel of software engineering, because as a software developer all day long, like I make some progress, I get to certain points, like, okay, I got this working, now what? It's like, okay, now I need to know this thing or what's the next step. Like it's so easy to get stuck at every turn all day long. Once you make some progress, you get to a point, and if you understand the why as kind of the guiding light, and you understand who the customer is, the problem, you're thinking about the problem at a higher level, it's easier to keep going. It's easier to make assumptions too of like, well, yeah, we talked about this thing last week in the product planning meeting, so I understand why this is important. So I think I know what I need to do next. I can keep going, right? But clarity is so critical. And the problem with clarity is you also can't give the engineers too much. You can't be like, here's the 100-page requirements document. Go read it and go do this thing. They're going to ask you for the TLDR version, right? Like, it's too long. I didn't read this. What is the thing I actually need to know? I'm not going to read this 100-page thing, right? Clarity is so important. So we talk a lot about that in the book. The fourth one you mentioned is shared ownership. Not ownership, shared ownership. Because in a team, nobody is really going to own anything. You know, even as the founder, like I don't want to own the whole vision. I want everybody to help me, right? We want all of us together to share the vision and have ownership in what we're doing and why it matters. Like shared ownership, I think is so important. Like we don't want one product manager that thinks like he owns everything, right? We want the team. We want everybody working together. Everybody has ideas, right? So shared ownership, I think, is a really key thing to this. And the fifth one is courage. You mentioned earlier, courage is so important. And courage is one of the things at Full Scale we really harp on with our employees, right? It's the courage to speak up, ask the questions, to frankly give a shit, to care. Courage is so important to grow, right? And not live in an environment of fear. You know, fear is kind of is the opposite, which we don't want. We don't want an environment of fear. So it was weird to me, Craig, to be like, how did I define like a culture? Like, did I ever seem like a culture guy to you?
No, but you know, I am a culture guy, so I love seeing this as it's taken shape. You know, I've, as you know, from our time working together in the past and now, um, so I always say business, software, it's all a people sport. And so
It is.
creating the conditions for
And they're
people to
messy,
do, yeah, people are messy, right? That's
very
just a
messy.
fundamental truth. And business is messy because business is people. And so, I've always been a big proponent of building winning cultures, right? Like that's how companies win. There's the old culture eats strategy for breakfast thing. I think you need both, right? You need vision, strategy, but
Yeah.
you also need culture that wins. But if you don't create the right conditions for the right people to do great work, you still lose, even if you've got a great vision. And so, yeah, I loved seeing how the the concept of the book evolved. You know, I got to read early renditions and give some feedback, and it was interesting to see the pivot when it happened. Of this is really about people and unlocking people, enabling, empowering, creating the conditions and the system, right? Because it's a system. And what I think what people crave is like, give me a playbook, give me a system for how to do great work, how to have my team do great work, because that's really what leaders are trying to do.
And
Help
the
their
problem is
team.
none of us know what the hell we're doing,
Well,
right?
you talk about clarity, right? And
I
that.
was, but it's like I was a software engineer, and then they made me the leader.
Mhm.
I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I don't even want to be the leader. I want to go back and write code. Like I don't want to manage people, but all of a sudden I'm the leader, right? Like, but that's the reality. A lot of us go through at some point in our career trying to make that leap from individual contributor to leader, and we don't know how. And I feel like this book talks a lot about some of the culture as a leader of the things you need to be thinking about. Like
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I think that's what this book is great about. You're new into engineering leadership. These are things to think about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we there are like you said, there are a lot of books about how to build a startup, a lot of books about how to write good code, good architectural patterns and practices, things like that. And when you're an individual contributor, that's where you come from. You come
Yeah.
from whatever that domain is, whether it's development and engineering or product or whatever. However you ascend, you come up through the ranks as an individual contributor, doing something and thinking about something in a certain way about creating, building, producing, and eventually the plot changes. Your job is people, not code, not software. Now you still have to obviously be, expert at software things, but unlocking people, that's really where engineering leaders, product leaders, it's where leaders of people, are made or broken. You either do a great job of creating the conditions for your team to do amazing work, or you don't, and then that's where the results come from.
Well, and in the book, I mentioned at some point in time in my career, I realized the most productive thing I could do was make other people more productive, right? Which is like the light bulb moment probably for a lot of people of, we want to be the hero and we jump in and we do all these things. But at some point in time, you have to figure out like, I don't scale. I can't do all of these things. And if I'm going to build a team, eventually, like I need to build a team that doesn't need me. As bad as that sounds, like that you want to be needed, right? But to scale, that's the key. And I think one of the other things I mentioned in the book that's really important is there's four different kinds of engineering leadership. There's strategic, operational, technical, and product. There's four different types, and nobody is good at all four. If you think you're good at all four, you're like a purple squirrel, and we're going to capture you and study you. Nobody does all these. So like they're different personalities even. Like they're just people that are wired differently to do these things. And the problem is engineering leaders, we think we're a failure because we're not good at one of the four. But the reality is we're not going to be. And I think that's something that we all struggle with as well, is realizing that we're either not good at those things because maybe we think we're good at them, or we're not good at them, but we don't know what to do about it. And I think that's part of my goal at the book is for people to see themselves and understand what they're good at, what they're not good at, and be able to name some of these problems that they see. And I think I try and do a good job of that in the book. And I think that's one of the really important things is just understanding you can't do everything. You need help. You need to find your Craig. So,
Well, I think that's true. We all need um, we all need counterparts that that are strong in areas where we aren't, and
yep,
so and that's part of why we've kind of divided and conquered on roles within the engineering world, right? Like, if you're a really strong engineer, you're going to do software engineering, but if you're really good at talking to people and understanding problems, then you're in product. But at the same time, having overlap is good. Having, kind of T-shaped people is good, right? Where
yep.
you have some breadth to you as well as some depth in an area. And so I think, helping people be more T-shaped, helping people like broaden, right? Hey, you're not just an engineer, you're not just a developer, right? You can ask why. You can think like a product person. You can think like a customer. Encouraging people to kind of push back if something doesn't make sense. Like that's it's a little scary probably in some environments where like you don't really want to push back because then you seem like you're kind of a jerk, or you're just
Right.
one of those people that's kind of hard to get
Yeah.
along with or something. And
Yep.
and and the reality is, if you've created the right culture, then that's more celebrated rather
It's a
than,
leadership problem.
yeah. And again, it all comes back to, what are the conditions you've created for success? Do you create the
It,
conditions for people to,
yep.
step out of their lane a little bit and ask why, and challenge a little bit? There's this term, annealing. It's a blacksmithing term. And so when you're making like a sword or something, you heat up the metal, and then you beat the heck out of it with a hammer, and then you put it in water to quench it. And then you do that over and over again, and
Yeah.
it's violent, and it's right. But it's what makes that steel hard. It's what makes it durable. And I think great cultures allow for some of that annealing to happen too. Like, hey, let's challenge this a little bit. And I think that's the thing that I love seeing you call that out in the book, where you're talking about creating the environment, creating the
Yep.
culture, creating the conditions for everybody to feel like they have some ownership in the outcome. Because I think people want to have ownership of the outcome. They care.
There are absolutely people that do. And
Yeah.
not everybody will. Some people want to be heads down, and that's okay. But you need somebody on your team that is heads up, right? They can't all be heads down, right? And it starts with leadership, making that part of the goal and making it safe to ask those questions. Asking the team of like, what are we doing right now that's a terrible idea? Let's talk about it. Like
Yeah.
it's safe to talk about why that's a terrible idea. It just starts by having those conversations and making it safe to have those conversations.
As you wrote the book, and as you've thought about this, Matt, how do you feel like what do you think the changes are going to look like over the next several years in what leadership looks like, how they're engaged or embedded or involved in the teams? Like, do you see some changes happening in the future for the best teams, and how leadership it functions and works inside of organizations?
I think it's all going to have more and more of a product slant, honestly. I feel like software engineers are going to have to be like product owners. And there is a similarity to this already. So if you're doing no code development today, like you're managing, Salesforce or one of these things, you're doing no code development, you got to have deep product expertise, right? You have to understand, why am I doing what I'm doing, and I'm building out these workflows and making changes to whatever in this kind of no code environment, right? On the other end, you have full stack software development, which is deeply engineering related, but the more product mindset you have, the better you produce better results, right? But on the no code side, you have to be product minded, or you just don't accomplish anything, right? In the middle is low code. Low code is a hybrid of the two, right? It's like not doing a lot of coding, doing a little bit of coding, but I also have to deeply understand the product and the outcomes that I'm trying to build for the product. AI is going to shift us to the middle. AI is going to shift us to be more like low code, right? So these developers that were deep in the code, that didn't think about product, didn't think about users, are going to have to shift to the middle. And not all of them will make the shift. Not all of them will have to. We'll need people that do deeply engineering related things still. But more and more are going to have to make this shift to the middle. I think that's the best analogy. And we already see this today with no code and low code. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think probably everybody's coming to the middle a little bit. You have
Yeah.
product people that that can do things that they could never do before.
But we
Through
see the problems to that too.
sure, and and I think that's going to evolve, right? What
Yeah.
will it look like in 5 years from now? Will engineers need to be more like product people, and product people will need to be more like engineers? Like, will we all kind of move to? I don't know. Will we gravitate to the middle over time? What do you think?
I think to some degree we're going to get more generalists that can do these things, but we're also going to get more specialists, right? You're going to get people that are like, I don't do that vibe coding thing, but if you need me to do some like hardcore database performance tuning, like I'm the guy, right? Like we may get even a little more kind of specialization on some of these things, but AI helps a lot of people be very generalist, but they've got to understand the higher level like problems they're trying to solve. And all of us introverts, a lot of us don't want to talk to people and don't want to understand that. We enjoy the puzzles of the job. And I posted on social media the other day. It's like, engineers love the puzzles of the code, not the puzzles of like the customer problems, because the customer problems are also puzzles, but there's like no right answer to any of them.
Yeah, I think that
They're much more difficult to deal with.
yeah, no, I think that's right. And that was one of the things I remember you and I talking about over lunch a couple times was, how do you deal with sort of the introvert problem? Because a
Yeah.
lot of developers don't want to talk to people. And,
No.
what would you say to that? So if somebody's reading this book and they're like, yeah, this all sounds great, but my developers are introverts, what's the advice that you give them or that your book gives them? Like, okay, so fine, they're introverts. Here's how you can still make sure that they're engaged and owning and involved in the right way.
It's not that they have to all of a sudden go talk to customers all day, right? Like that's not what we're asking them to do. But we're asking them to, and again, this is a leadership problem, right? Of, you know what, let's take a little more time to make sure what we shipped last week actually mattered. Let's get that feedback and let's get that feedback back to the engineers, these introverts. Like, let's at least tell the introverts, let's complete the feedback cycle of like, hey, the work you did last week was good. It really worked. It really resonated with the user, provided a lot of value. They love it. Keep doing that. It was awesome, which is motivating to the team. Or it's like, you know what? There's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of issues. It didn't really quite solve their problems. Here's what we need to do next, right? Like it's at least just getting that feedback loop and getting it to the team, even if the team themselves isn't getting the feedback, but getting mechanisms in place of how to get that feedback, having leadership and product managers that drive getting that feedback. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. And there's a whole chapter about that in the book. But it's important to get that feedback, even if you're not talking to customers directly, but you're getting the feedback for them. So at least you understand how your work is impacting people. And it starts by having empathy and caring about how it impacts people, right? Like that's where it starts. You got to have empathy for the user.
Yeah, I think the empathy is huge, and I think most teams do have empathy. They want to solve real problems. There's nothing worse than spending a bunch of time building a product nobody uses.
Yeah.
Absolute demoralizing.
It happens
Um,
a lot in big companies. Stuff just gets
yeah,
shelved or you don't
yeah,
know how people use it.
yeah, and I think that empathy is really important. And I also think that this kind of model for the companies that embrace this way of thinking and that start down this path, it's going to put the spotlight on leadership because
Yeah.
leaders are going to have to really be able to communicate. This is the problem we're trying to solve. This is the value we're trying to create, and you can't tie the work back to the outcome unless you really understand the outcome you're trying to create. And so,
Yep.
back to your whole point about you know talking to customers, understanding customers better, things like that. Um, if you don't really understand the impact you're trying to make, it will come out. It will be really obvious. If you can't communicate to me how this impacted our customers positively, I'm going to have questions, and you should have questions.
Well, I really appreciate you joining me today for the special launch edition of Product Driven. I spent about 500 hours writing this book, and like a lot of things in life, there's like no final version. There's just a deadline. So it's
Right.
like at some point in time, it's like I can't do this anymore. I have written, rewritten, done all the work. Like I need to write some other blog or newsletter about the process of writing a book and the behind the scenes of it. Was fascinating. But I hope everybody loves the book. And if nothing else, is like I'm just tired of writing and talking about it. It's like let's just ship this thing, just like everything else. Like F it, ship it. Like here we go. So ready to get it out in the world and see what people think. So
Yeah, I was privileged to get to see early versions of it all the way through to the end, and I think the direction you took it, in the end was worth the work, worth the effort. I think there's a lot of really good content in here that's timely that will help people. Even if you don't apply everything in the book, you're going to think about things differently after you read
yeah,
it. It's going to
that's
make
the
you
goal.
rethink how you approach, delivering value for your company, for your customers, how you engage your team, how you unlock them. And so, I definitely encourage all the not just engineering and product leaders out there, but also software business leaders. If you're a CEO
Yeah,
or some other C-level, leader within an organization, these are important topics because this kind of stuff starts at the very top. And
it
so
does.
there's not anything in here that's so technical that you as a leader that isn't a software leader, couldn't process. And so I encourage people to read the book, take on the lessons, figure out the things you can go apply tomorrow, and
Yeah.
and start creating the new generation of software organizations, because I think the world's changing quickly, as we're all seeing. AI, everything's changing things rapidly right now, and the old models, maybe it's time to give them a rethink. I think this is a good call to action for people to, take a step back, look at how you're doing things, and see if you can improve it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Craig, for doing this with me today. And check out the book. It's on Amazon, Product Driven. And thank you guys so much. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter as well. If you find it at productdriven.com. And thank you guys. Let me know what you think. Send me a message on LinkedIn. Tell me what you think of the book. Thanks, Craig.
Congrats on the launch.
Thank you, sir. Before we wrap up today's episode, we have a special resource for you if you're looking to elevate your development team to have more of a product-driven mindset. I have a fantastic free ebook about turning your code-first team into a product-first team. Please go to fullscaleteam.com/product-first-teams to download this free ebook. There's also a link in the show notes. Thanks for listening to Product Driven, and we'll see you in the next episode.